All right, great. We're on. So welcome. This week I have condensed what was going to be how to teach offense and go through everything. Sorry about my dog. And instead, we're just doing how to teach individual offense this week, with the idea that next week will be more how to teach team offense and look at a couple of different concepts that some of my teams use, and more to do with how I teach it more than what I teach, but more than happy to take questions on both. This is a topic that I think everyone's going to know, a lot about, or a lot of different things, and it may be new, it may be all the same stuff you've heard before, but feel free to ask any questions, or as many questions as you like. Again, you can send them through to me if you want, or you can put your hand up and ask the question, just using that little hand up button on the side of your screen. I've got a couple of videos to show, which were videos I took of SDP sessions just before we stopped training, which was really handy because I didn't know we were about to do this, but they've come in handy preparing tonight. I would have taken more had I known we were about to sit at home for the next 3 months. But without further ado, I'll get into it. So I've broken down this week's session into these categories. I think posture and stance will be a quick one. Stopping and starting, so how you start and stop moving, obviously. Pivoting, ball handling, 2- and 1-handed passing, and finishing. You'll notice that I don't have shooting there. When I was trying to fit this into a 40-minute episode, there's no way you can do that and include shooting. So we'll do one of shooting on its own, because it's such a diverse and specialized topic. I'd hate to do half a job and give bad or incomplete information. So we'll touch on that in one of the next 2 weeks. So we'll get into it. So, sorry, before we go. So I will be talking about this more in how I would talk to the under 14 age group, which is what I've done most weeks, because that's really aiming at that middle. More than happy to take questions about younger and older kids, if you've got something that you were pretty sure was how you do it, and maybe I've explained something different. Feel free to clarify, because things do sort of adjust over different age groups. So posture and stance. So this is one where we do a lot of teaching on the defensive stance, but whilst the defensive stance is definitely a thing, what I try and teach more is the basketball stance. So that is just consistently having your knees over your toes in a crouched position with your chest out, so that you're low and powerful. So many kids that I coach immediately get the ball and stand up, and they look around, and they're getting their chest out, but they're just jogging up the court feeling really good, hoping that everybody's sort of watching them. And it's about being low and in that stance all the time. So conditioning the athletes at a younger age to have the idea of, this is my basketball stance, not this is my defensive stance, is I think important to getting better, more athletic athletes. With this, you can make them sit on a wall for ages, which I've been guilty of doing in the past. But what I like to do is show them the way first, and then just make this something that you consistently correct throughout time. So it's not necessarily that we're going to spend 10 minutes at the start of every training session practicing our stance, but it's something that you have showed them. So like when we were talking about the defense last week, we were saying, show them the goal. It's the same concept. So we're showing them that goal stance, and that way, hopefully we can just pick up on them a few times, like, hey, Richard, stance. And he knows, oh, yep, I'm standing up way too tall, and he gets to drop down. So it's one of those things that you can correct relentlessly along the way. Stopping and starting. So I think this is one of the most undertaught things at early age groups. And what that means is a lot of athletes develop bad habits, which are then really difficult to get out. So when we talk about stopping, we talk about a stride stop and a jump stop. So a jump stop being that you land 2 feet at the same time, a stride stop being that you come in on 1 foot, bringing the other foot behind. So one more when we're moving, look, realistically, this is personal preference as to which one they do. They've just got to be good at doing one. We have a lot of kids that travel because they land with their chest forward of their knees, not in that basketball stance. They're toppling forward, they take an extra step, or they shuffle their feet. That means they've picked a pivot foot. Now they travel as they go and try and take off. So this is one of those things where it's about teaching them how to land like they're ninjas. So that way they're light on their feet and they're really balanced every time they're landing. Personally, I teach the jump stop a lot more than I teach the stride stop. However, I'm more than happy for kids who like to do that more, to do that as much as they please. So really, and I'll show you how I teach these two in a minute. We'll go through my zigzag dribble drill, which is not mine. Like, I pilfered it off Sinisha Markovic, who you may or may not know. I don't know where he is now, but he used to be at Sandringham, and I do that drill with every age group I have relentlessly. So I'll show you that in a second. Starting off, we have only two real ways to start off. The crossover step, where to go left, you would bring your right foot across your body, dribbling with your left hand, going to your left. So that way your left foot is the pivot foot, swinging the right foot across. So you're crossing over on that step, moving in the left direction, or the throw down. So this is where you can't do a crossover step because you've already picked a pivot foot and you're going in the opposite way. So instead you throw that ball down from your right hand. So we're still going to the left. So you've thrown it from your right hand. It's left your hand towards the ground. And now you're allowed to take off with that left foot first, because that was the one that you were allowed to move. So early on in my coaching, I was teaching not a throw down, but instead an onside step or a crossover step. But what I've found as I started coaching higher and higher levels, and you get higher and higher level referees, is they're really watching that pivot foot, and any sort of shuffle or drag on that pivot foot on an onside step is pinged as a travel. And while we're trying to create better athletes that can go to higher levels, it's a much better idea to teach them something that they're going to be able to do throughout the long term. So I will take you to my zigzag dribbling. Now, this again is footage, and we know that with Zoom is that footage can be really bad and jumpy. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly start it, and I'll try and stop it and explain things along the way, because I think that way, hopefully it'll catch up for everybody and make it a bit easier. So here we talk about the jump stop throwdown, which we've just done. So this is one of our SDP sessions. This is Alex Molan. You watch as he gets to one of these cones. There's one over on the baseline that you can't see, the sideline that you can't see here. He's going to jump stop. So he doesn't do a great job of it there, because this is sort of a warm up for us these days. But they get to a cone, which is just in between his 2 feet here. He jump stops, completely stopping his dribble. He should be knees over toes. He's got a bit of a wider stance here. And then he goes to throw the ball down, which I paused at it as an awkward time for. Throws the ball down across his body, which is what you're seeing there, which allows him to move that right foot first as he takes off. This might be a better angle. So he doesn't put a long pause in between his jump stop here like he should, but you see he's in a low stance, and that's enabling him to now throw the ball across his body. That's a really good one from Fletcher, actually. We'll use that one. That's probably the best teaching point. So Fletcher lands in a jump stop here. You see now how he's throwing the ball across his feet. So he's now allowed to move that left foot that he has moved there without that being a travel. Or move the right foot, if that was his pivot foot, probably would have been, without that being a travel, and come across his body. So we're establishing a pivot foot early. We're throwing the ball down, which allows us to attack in a different direction without traveling. I'll just let this play for a bit, and hopefully it looks all right for you like it does on my screen. But this is how we teach them both the jump stop and the different way to take off. Now, we do that. That was with a throwdown, because I thought the throwdown was the more difficult one if you hadn't seen it before to understand through me talking. But the crossover step we practice the exact same way, and they're our best kids, but we practice stopping and starting and stopping and starting pretty much every session, because there's nothing worse than watching good kids waste possessions by traveling. The other one we do is using repeat lines. So this is one that I would do with some of the younger kids that we have, where we might start them on the baseline with a ball. We might have them dribble out, jump stop here, have them land on 2 feet, and then have them start again. This might be a really good idea too if you've only got a half a court. Maybe you've got 20 kids and you don't have space to set them out on a nice zigzag going up and down the full floor. Maybe you do that instead. You might start them off here, have them dribble out, jump stop, have them start again, jump stop, and then have them pivot all the way around, and then have them do that on the way back, and then they can take off in lines after each other. So you're just focusing on them being in that athletic basketball stance and moving the ball properly. Hopefully everyone can see that. Are there any questions thus far about your posture and stance or your stopping and starting? Just got to find out where questions go, because I've got one. So Brad's asked a good question. Is there a reason I teach the jump stop over the stride stop? Yes, I think it gives players more choice, because I think when you land on that jump stop, it gives you more balance and it gives you more choice. That being said, some kids are much more comfortable with the stride stop, so I let them roll with that. But if I'm teaching someone that's neutral, I teach them that more than I don't, because I think it gives them a lot more options and a lot more balance, which I think are both important. So hopefully that answers your question, Brett. Moving on then into pivoting. So I thought this was just important to touch on, even though I'm sure everybody knows what a pivot is. Pivoting is really important, and a lot of kids travel when they pivot. So teaching that pivot, forward pivot and reverse pivot at a young age, like, I don't know if you've seen netballers do it, where they teach that whole catch on 2 feet and you squash the bug with little pivots around in a circle, forward or in reverse. Really important just to get through, to help them understand that concept of not necessarily big movements, but this is how we turn around without traveling. And how we would do that, going back to our same drill over here. So obviously the one I demonstrated before would be how you could do that, or you could just have them dribble all the way out in their line out here, have them jump stop, have them go short pivot, short pivot, short pivot, have them do it all the way back, jump stop here, short pivot, and then do it all the way back again. And you could have them going forward and reverse pivot all the time. The other thing you can do, let me just figure out how to erase this. I shouldn't have been such a yuck dribbler, drawer. Oof, that wasn't as quick as I thought. I'll go back to the drawing board on that for next week. Oh, that was heaps better. Hopefully some of you are familiar with the Spurs drill. Now, that's a really good way, the zigzag dribbling and the line out dribbling, to teach pivoting to younger age groups. Personally, I teach a lot of older kids, and I think if I got them to do that for too long, they would get bored. So the Spurs drill is something that I'm hoping that a lot of you have seen before. It's the idea of split kick extra. So it's when someone splits, creates a split, so getting 2 feet inside the paint, this person would then lift up out of the corner. And from this position, this player would chuck the ball either out to one of these two guys here, and that's creating a split, and then kicking it, and then they would make the extra pass. What I do with all of my under 18 boys and all of my state teams is use this here when they're getting in as a great way to teach our jump stop, landing on 2 feet inside the key, and then all of our different pivots. So a lot of my teams, they all have to come to a 2 foot stop here. There is no jumping and passing unless we're practicing that. And I get them to either to play off alternating forward and reverse pivots. So let's say the first guy comes in and does a forward pivot, and he might jump stop here, right foot across his body, and then pass it out to this guy. This guy then passes that extra pass, which is why it's split kick extra. The corner guy now drives in, and now he's in this position to jump stop. Because this first guy did a forward pivot, this guy's now got to swing around and do a reverse pivot, and then he might chuck it out to there, or he might reverse the other way, and he might chuck it out to there. That's a really good way to have them demonstrate, or to demonstrate to them how to be creative off of 2 feet. So it's not just jumping and zinging that thing around your back all the time. That's the cool stuff. You can still be creative, and you can still use those pivots, those basic pivots you might have learned in under 12s. They're still coming in handy now in under 18s. So that's a really good way I find to teach pivoting to kids that are a bit older and a bit more experienced, that probably don't want to stand in throw out lines, throwing the ball out to themselves, catching it on a jump stop, squash the bug. Because if you were getting a bunch of 17-year-old boys to do that, you would not last long. Any questions about pivoting? One question I thought I might get is to teach the forward or the reverse pivot on the catch on the 3-point line. So let's say the players come up, they've caught that pass. How do I want them to pivot? I like to teach a reverse pivot in an isolation, because I think that creates a closeout. And I like to teach a forward pivot when I'm going into a screen. So I'll just bring this back up. Again, if you don't understand what I mean by this, that's okay. This isn't for everyone necessarily. So if I've come up here and I've caught the ball there, so let's say I caught the ball from high and there's no screen coming from anywhere, and this guy is chasing me up here, I like to catch that on my high foot and then swing the reverse pivot around. So that way I'm creating extra distance he has to close out. Otherwise, I'm just going to turn and shoot the ball there. Conversely, when I'm coming up of this way, and let's say I've caught the ball from the trail big and I've caught the ball here, and now the big's coming down to set that screen for me there, I actually like to catch that on a forward pivot, because now I can step that forward pivot across my body and really have the defender who's come from this side here step in to cut that off. And this allows this screener to get a little bit better angle. So that's how I would teach those two, and when to use them. However, if kids, again, it's a bit like the jump stop and stride stop. If kids are more comfortable playing out of one than the other, and you're catching them at a later age, I'm more than okay to deal with whatever they're comfortable with, because I don't think it necessarily adds that much to a lot of kids' games. If you were dealing with a really good kid and you watched tape on them and you found that forward pivot would always put them into trouble, maybe you could change that. But from what I've found thus far, if one kid's really good at one, you just let him do that one. Any questions on pivoting? I've got my chat box up in the corner now. I'm actually looking at my other screen here, not anyone in particular. So if you've got a question, feel free to send it through, and I'll actually see it come up this time. All right, so now we're going to ball handling. So ball handling sort of split into general control and then dribble moves. That's how I've decided to split this up tonight. So your ball handling comes down to being comfortable controlling the ball with both hands. So there's plenty of ways you can do this, and experience is obviously the best way to get better at this. But I'll just throw a couple of different videos that, again, I've got to do with a couple of my SDP guys. Now, this is becoming really handy for us at the moment because everybody's at home and they can't really play one-on-one. So doing these other things to make them more comfortable handling the ball and more just confident dribbling a ball without really thinking about it is really handy. So the first one, it's a bit of an awkward one, and you'll probably watch it and be like, "Oof, I don't know about that." That's okay. This is more for if it's raining and you're inside and you're not allowed to dribble it, or mum's really going to lose it if you dribble that ball anymore. This may be how you practice it. So I hope this comes up all right for you. But this is Liam. So he's just testing the limits of how he can handle the ball in one hand without dribbling it. Now he's going to go through a couple of inside swings, reverse swings, and then he's going to start throwing the ball sort of and catching it awkwardly. Now, obviously you wouldn't do this near a bars or a low-hanging light, but if you're inside, this is just a really good way to get a bit better feel of the ball around your body, and putting it in just one hand and not using that other hand to catch any bad passes is a really good way to just make him more comfortable with that ball. So I'll let it play out. So this was the first time we did it. So Liam's a lot better at this now. I don't think I put passing first. Maybe. So this is the dribbling one. So this is Sam. When Sam's allowed to dribble the ball out the back, maybe it's early. Maybe he's got a good space to do it in. This is something we work on here. It's crossover dribbles, crossover V dribbles, sideways V dribbles, a couple of onside dribbles, and then a couple of through the legs combos. So this is how I would try and get them to feel more comfortable dribbling the ball all the way around their body. And see, Sam's just using his right hand here. He's not getting that left hand in. He's not perfect, but that's a really good one to title text here. I did well there. He's not using that other hand, and it's just a really good way to actually have that control. And this is all their dominant hands, but as they throw it to their weak hands, it's dreadful. And like, these are under 18 boys. Sam made the country Vic state team this year, and doing that one-handed stuff with his left hand, dreadful might be a bit of a stretch, but it's not good. So this is something that Sam's been doing in his downtime back in Horsham to make sure that he can be ready should he get a nationals up later this year. So now we're going to the passing one. This is a bit tougher. We're still working on how this works best, but Sam at home, he's got no one to pass with. This is how he's going to practice some different sorts of passes. So you see, it's just getting him comfortable feeling where the ball is and getting an understanding of how he's going to have the ball in any particular part of his body or his being. And that's really what I would call ball handling, in terms of understanding how to have the ball around your body. So there are a couple of different ways that I've used with kids. I don't think you have to do the same ones as me. They're not actually ones that I invented by any means. Street. I threw it to the kids to have a bit of a think about different things they thought could challenge them, and that was what they came back with after a few days of thinking about it. And then we put that in over our whole hub, and now we've got all 30 kids doing the same sorts of things, so they can warm each other up when we get to training before we actually start. So that's what I would call ball handling, their ability to actually be comfortable holding the ball. Our dribble moves, so we'll go back to our zigzag dribbling here, but the main dribbling moves that I think that kids need to practice in no specific order are these ones. So I think that everybody should know what they are. The ones that I've come on to have problems with when talking to people is the onside dribble, or what I would call the onside dribble, and the retreat dribble. So the onside dribble is almost like your fake crossover, where you're bringing that ball from outside knee on the right hand all the way across your body to the other side, and then all the way back to shift that defender. That's what I would call an onside dribble. And your retreat dribble is when you're moving backwards away from your defender to try and secure some more space or secure less pressure. So I found different people use different terminology for those two, but for the other four, they're all pretty self-explanatory. Teaching these. So I'll show you the zigzags, which I just showed you before, but I'll just show you a couple of different times that we've done them. Through all these, and then I'll show you sorry, I don't have video on the prescribed one-on-one, but I'll explain that to you once we've done with the zigzags. With the zigzags, we're always looking for a change of pace and a change of direction. And that's the key thing to all of these dribble moves. And that's what a lot of kids don't understand. And because they watch a lot more NBA now than they did sort of when I was growing up, and they see all these guys that would put 6 sick dribble moves together and chuck a 3 up. And they think that the reason they're doing that is because they, it looks cool, but the reason the NBA players do it is because they actually have some really good defenders playing on them, and to shift the defense, they need to do all these things. Our kids a lot of the time can pick that ball up, put one crossover down, and get to the basket. If that's all you need to do to get to the basket, that's all you should be doing. It's not about looking cool, it's about being efficient. So we really try and talk to, if you're doing dribble moves and you're not changing pace and changing direction, then you're wasting everybody else's time, but mainly the coaches. So I'll show you this zigzag dribble drill. Sorry, just so I get a bit of an idea. Thumbs up if this is actually showing even half decently, or if it's thumbs down if it's just showing really poorly and I won't spend some time on it. Yeah, a couple of thumbs up. All right, cool. So back to these guys doing these zigzag dribbles. So you see, arguably their change of pace isn't awesome, but this is at 6:35 in the morning. So you got to give them a little bit of a break here because they're teenage boys. At least they're doing more than the guys sitting on the sideline who are crooks. That's fair enough. But you see the change of direction is forced because they're going to the cones, but the change of pace is all up to them. So they've gone from slowing right down to exploding, or they should be going to exploding. Robert's doing his best there. And there are normal crossovers. Onside crossover. So this is where we're teaching ball all the way from outside right knee to all the way across to left knee, bringing it back again, and then snapping them with a crossover. So while we piggyback on top of these things, we are making sure that we're teaching them the why. So not only is this a good way to make them stop and to really force that change of pace on them, because if I just get them doing one crossover, there's a chance they jog into it, crossover, and they end up just doing a big sort of slow zigzag. By doing this, they have to come to a complete stop, and then any takeoff in the other direction is a real change of pace. So it's a good way to do that. And it's just a really good way to shift the defender with that onside dribble. And you've got a good handle like Alex does. He does this all the time to the defender's detriment. So just really teaching and over accentuating. So you might look at Aussie there and you're like, whew, that didn't look great, but that's him overdoing it to make sure that he can handle it all the way out there. In a game, he probably doesn't pull it 6 inches outside of his left knee, but by being comfortable doing that, then doing half as hard of that is a lot easier. And if you were here last week when I talked about teaching them the hardest way, that's what that's all about. So I'll just pick up Fletcher here, right? So that is what we call a bad stance from Fletcher. You can see out his hips, he's just sort of bent over, his knees aren't really bent. And so that's where, if I wasn't filming this, or if I turn the volume up, you'd probably hear me pick on Fletcher about his stance. So we're talking about how we teach stance. Just pick him up when they do it wrong. Fletcher knows what he's doing. Onside through the legs. I won't stop this one. Same concept as the last one. We're making them slow down, and then we're piggybacking on different dribble moves So we saw the difference between Robbo's onside dribble there. It's good filming by me. We saw the difference between Robbo's onside dribble there, where he didn't get all the way across to that outside knee, versus Fletcher's, where he flew the thing all the way outside knee. That's the difference in someone sort of being really paying a lot of attention. So now we look at our onside spins. So again, this is forcing them to change pace, forcing to locate again, finishing in the basket. I didn't realize I filmed this much finishing. It's after this. So then we go into combo. So again, like I said before, watching those NBA players do 4 different dribble moves, one after the other, it's not necessary in the level these guys play, but it's important that they're able to handle the ball and do those tougher things. So while I don't expect them to go out and throw these combos at people on a Friday night, I do expect them to be able to do them, because it's testing that ability to be a ball handler. So if they can knock down 6 quick moves in a couple of seconds, flip it on a spin and sprint the other way, then I guarantee you they can do one crossover and sprint the other way and hang on to that ball under a bit of pressure. So it's just putting them in that position to teach them the hardest thing in the hope that they can do the easy thing better under pressure. So again, if I ever saw Ozzy do that on a Friday night, we'd be having words, but he's good at it. So I know that when he comes to cross someone over, he'll be fine. And now the important part of, we'll get to finishing later, actually. I'll explain the rest of the zigzag drill when we get there. So I hope you understand, zigzag drill is my favorite drill, if you haven't picked that up. And I think it's very useful for a number of reasons. You can also step it out and do some passing, which I'll draw for you a bit later when we get to passing. And you can institute some finishing stuff in it as well. So it's just a really good way to get the kids moving. If they do that zigzag drill for 5 or 6 minutes, they are stuffed. So there's a lot of running and a lot of moving, and it doesn't stop very often. And it's just a really good drill. So the other way I would teach ball handling, or the change of pace part of ball handling, change of direction part of ball handling, is to start the offense with the ball out here, and you're going to make them drive to either the wing sort of area here or to the elbow, and the defender who's playing defense on them is token defense until there. So they're now establishing a pace and a direction as they go this way. Now, from this spot here, which you may have a cone, if you've got one, you may just use an intersect of 2 lines that are on the court, like we all deal with courts that look a bit like that. And from this point here, they have to slow down, they have to put a move in, and then they have to explode, because that's where the live one-on-one picks up. So you have them going down, and you're prescribing that there is a change of pace and direction here. Because let's say Alex is driving down here, and this is where Fletcher sort of really picks him up and starts to cut him off. So now we're playing explosive out of that, and we're being live out of there. So too often when you give them one-on-one, they might just go head down to the basket, put a bad shot up. It's okay, that's a learning experience too. But this is a different way to teach them that whole idea of change of pace and change of direction. I think for a lot of younger kids too, I don't know how many of you guys watch under 14s and under 12s on a Friday night, but they normally play before my boys doing the VJDL often. And I see a lot of shots where I see, especially the boys, drive here on their dominant hand and get ridden on their shoulder or their hip, drive here, get to about there, and then chuck off a really poor hook shot from about there, just because that was all they saw. And they didn't see all their mates standing by themselves around here. They didn't see any chance for a change of direction. So that's where you're really sort of teaching them how to get away from those push points as the defenses are pushing them there. And I think it's important that we try and do that as early as we can, so we don't create guys and girls that just chuck the ball up. So are there any questions there about ball handling in terms of how I teach it, in terms of anything else? Actually, one other thing that I used to teach when I coached under 14 girls a lot of was the retreat dribble. So I find that the retreat dribble is something that comes a little bit more naturally to boys from my experience coaching them, whereas girls are much quicker to pick the ball up and try and find one of their teammates to pass it to, whereas boys picking the ball up, not so much, because they don't want to stop dribbling it. So how I would do that is I used to line under 14 girls out across the baseline. They would all dribble it up to about here, and then they would go from there, 2 retreat dribbles, then cross over to go the other way. And then they're coming up here. They all stop together, 2 retreat dribbles, cross over 2 retreat dribbles, cross over the next way, and then the same thing all the way to half court, all the way back. You've got 10 girls, you've got half a court. That's a good way to get them all practicing. Now you're standing out there in front of them, so you're up here moving back with them, and all their eyes have to be on you. Or that's you, your assistant coach is back here. So once they get to half court, they turn around, all their eyes are on her. So that way is you're teaching the eyes up the whole time while they're trying to put that ball behind their body with their arm bar here to keep the defender away from them, and they're moving back to create space. And that's a really important one, I think, teaching young kids, because especially girls, because they just want to do what's right, and often passing the ball is what's right. But yeah, too quickly they just pick the ball up all the time, and that puts them under a lot of pressure. And I think that's a good one to teach, especially under 12, 14 age group. So no questions about ball handling? Oh, yep. For retreat dribble, is it a jump or a step back? So I would teach steps, Dunny. So I'll just bring my really cool whiteboard up again. So if I was dribbling in here and I got to retreat dribble, it is a slow sideways step. So my body, so that's my left foot, that's my right foot, that's my body, and I'm going that way. So my body is facing that direction. The ball is on this side here. The defender is on that side there, and that's my armbar in that defender's chest. And now I'm moving in that direction, stepping sideways while I dribble the ball. Hopefully you understand that drawing. I know it's a bit keen, but it's a side step, chins on that shoulder. You're looking that way, but you're going that way. And now you're looking, okay, what else is up the floor? And while you're dragging that defender away, you may be creating room behind them for someone else to cut. You may be creating room behind them for you to drive past, because maybe that help defender that was there is now backed away, the one that cut you off in the first place, or anything like that. So it's a retreat dribble. It's not a step back jump shot or anything like that, like where you see the guys who would take that big jump back, pick the ball up and shoot it. I don't think you need to teach that. If a kid wants to use it, they'll figure it out. It's a really flary sort of thing. That one for me anyway. I can't say I teach step backs very often, because often there's someone better that can shoot it. Or someone in a better position that can shoot it, I should say. That's a good question, Dunny, because that's what I mean. Like a lot of people use different terminology for this stuff, and it's often hard when you come in and they don't explain exactly what they mean to actually know for sure if you're thinking the same thing. Okay, we'll move on to passing now. We have two-handed passing. So the only real two-handed passes I teach are the chest pass and the skip pass. So, did I just close me drawing? Oh, there you go. So the skip pass, I don't think there's another word for that, so I think I'll be right, but I'll just draw it anyway. The skip pass is when you are crossing two lanes of the court. So let's imagine that, so our middle lane is, that's not very straight, but our middle lane is the keyway, and our right lane is out here, and our left lane is out here. If you're ever passing the ball from one lane across the middle lane to the other lane, it's a skip pass, and it's one where that ball is two hands above your head and you're flicking it forward, pushing your thumbs through the ball as you do so. This one's really difficult to teach at the younger age groups because not many of them have the upper body strength to do so. I find that some of the girls get it at top age 14s, some of the boys get it at bottom age 16s, but most of them don't get it till top age 16s when they've actually developed a little bit more. But that's a really important one to teach as you go towards seniors. When we do our skip drills at SDP training, a lot of the kids try and hide it with a really loopy push pass. It's just not going to cut it at under 18. So that's a good one to practice if you're coaching one of those older age groups, your 16s or your under 18s. Your under 18s should probably have it by then, but 16s especially. And your chest pass. So I actually think the two-handed chest pass, the only real time you get to use one of them is, let's say you've picked that ball up, your four-man has inbounded you the ball, you swung through and caught that as the point guard, and you're now going this way. And as you dribble, there's someone up in your front court and there's no one in between them. That's when you might use a two-handed push pass to push the ball that way. That is about the only time I think I see kids use a two-handed push pass anymore, is on a kick ahead. Every other time there is a defender that is too close to them to actually put two hands on the ball. So that's where your one-handed passing becomes a lot more important, in my opinion. So how I would teach two-handed passing, only the simple ways other than in prescribed match play, is sticking partners either side and having them pass. Now, if they're under 10s or under 8s, maybe you've got one ball, and so they're just going to go chest pass, chest pass, chest pass. If you're under 12s even, or if you've done this a couple of times and you're pretty confident they're good with one ball, you might give them both a ball, and this guy might be doing a bounce pass underneath this guy who's doing a chest pass over the top. So that way you have that ball zinging back and forth, and they're really focusing on getting those thumbs through the ball and pointing at their teammate once they pass it. So that's probably the best way to teach a stationary pass like that. And then everything else is more prescribed game-like. So let's say you're doing, as a bit of a warm-up, you might be doing full court layups. Maybe it's someone's job to pass the ball in from here, someone else's job to swing through, catch the ball, take 2 dribbles, and kick ahead that 2-handed chest pass up the court to another guy or girl that's catching the ball there, and they're dribbling in for a layup. So you're simulating the idea of a fast break, and that might be how you practice that full court chest pass, but that's probably something that you get to once you're pretty confident they've got the actual concept of a 2-hand chest pass and pushing those thumbs through and not jumping, tipping the ball into one shoulder and chucking it out like that, like all the under 12 boys I've ever coached. So just making sure that they pick that up before you get to that thing that is a bit tougher on them. One-handed passing. So you push pass, you bounce pass, and you scoop pass. So the scoop pass is one that is not as common. That's more when you've got that ball and you've got to get low around your knees and flick that thing into the post. Not something that I necessarily think you need to teach the younger kids, but it is important to get the big guys the ball once they get to that 16 to 18 seniors, and you actually need to start feeding them all the time because they're actually big and they're not just the tallest of the 5'1" kids. So push pass. Push pass. So when the ball is on one side of your body, you might have the other hand out as an arm bar and you have to push pass it off the dribble. It might be that you are coming around a corner and you're flicking it up that way. All of them I would call a push pass. Now, the best way to teach this I have for you. Now, you're going to love this, right? So this is why I do the zigzag drill all the time. In the zigzag drill, you've got cones that are here, up and down both sides of the court and both ends of the court. Now, you want to get tricky. You move the cones that are on the sideline into the lane line. So you get, 5 kids to get a cone each and they kick them in. And now instead of them being wide, they're in this sort of setup. So I'll just take these ones away so it doesn't confuse anyone. Now, you have a group under the basket here and a group under the basket here. You have one of them that has a ball. Let's say, for argument's sake, it's this one. And they're going to pass left-handed. So as this guy, there wouldn't be a cone that was this deep. It'd be a little bit higher up. But as this guy cuts across, he makes a left-handed push pass. A right-handed push pass. He then catches the ball here, dribbles around this cone while the other guy's going around the other cone, loops around. He dribbles around this cone, flicks off a one-handed push pass across to here. This guy who's come off of this cone catches it, does the same thing. So it's able to teach them those push passes off of the dribble, and you only have to move the cones in, 2 meters from where they were first. So if you're talking about ways to practice your dribbling and practice your passing, but you've only got an hour with these kids and you really want to go, that's the easiest way to cut it down. You don't have to give them a break. You go from 6 minutes into that, they're already a bit tired, into 4 or 5 minutes of this. And then in 10 to 15 minutes, they're absolutely knackered and they've got some really good dribbling and some really good passing practice in. And that's that whole transition is one that I learned from Sinisha. Again, don't know where Sinisha is now, but he was at Sandy when I was at Sandy. And that was something I've kept for the last, what must be 6 or 7 years now. And I don't think there's a better way to teach it. The other way to teach some more compounding stuff is just your straight up piggy in the middle. If you're allowed to call it piggy in the middle, that's what we call it. So where you've got your one defender, so the defender is the O in this case. I don't know why I did that, but the offensive players are the X's. So they have a ball, really good way to teach passing under pressure. So that defensive player is obviously going to take away that two-handed push pass. So they've got to get used to the two-handed push pass. They've got to get used to the one-sided push pass out and around the defender, the skip pass over their head. And then once they've got the idea of that, then you're adding pivots in. And they can take those big cross-body pivots and throw that push pass even wider to make it harder for the defender to get their hands up in front of it. So that's the 2 ways I would teach push passing and bounce passing to kids if I have more than one kid, obviously. Moving on, because I am conscious this week I've looked at a clock as I've gone along, so I didn't run into 9 o'clock and then go, oh, damn. last thing is finishing. So finishing would probably be the thing that I practice the most with some of my more elite kids, because it's the thing that really sets them apart, and it's the thing that they often don't practice enough themselves. So with the younger kids, I'm all about teaching them the fundamental form, the idea of on the right side of the basket, we want to lay it up with our right hand, and we want our right knee in the air jumping off our left foot. I start that off with having kids on the low block, and they're going to take one big step with their left foot, and they're going to jump up, right knee up, right hand, ball in the right hand, and they're letting that go. That's how easy I back it down. So it's literally just one step forward. There's no dribbling, because that's added difficulty. And as they get the hang of that one step forward pass, then I step it out, and maybe they take 2 steps lay up, and then step it out again, and it's one dribble, 2 steps lay up. So we're stepping it out that way. Now, there's a lot of chat at the moment about how fundamental form of that basic right hand layup or left hand layup on the right side just isn't as realistic, because there's always so much pressure on these kids. They've got to make tougher layups. Totally. But I still think they need to be able to do the fundamental form right first and step that out. And once they get better at that, now maybe you get into the right hand reversal or the left hand reversal under it, and you step it out. And then maybe it's the wrong foot one, where you're on that right hand side, but you've got your right foot down, and you've got to get that shot up quicker before that big guy or girl comes across and blocks you. So instead of putting that extra step out and then getting up on your right hand, you're just jumping off your right foot. It makes you half as athletic, but twice as quick to get the actual shot up. So it's about stepping it out and teaching them all. The really big issue I have at the moment with a lot of the girls in our Ballarat program is this is what they default to for some reason. And it kills any athleticism they had, because as you probably all know, there's biomechanics. If you're jumping up with your right hand and your right foot's still on the ground, you just don't go anywhere. So that's fine as a change up. Again, that big 6'8" girl's coming across, I've got to chuck that off a step earlier. Great. But as a default, it just takes any athleticism out of the game. And I've got a lot of girls who I continually say, yep, like try the other one. And they just can't get it. So I don't know if it's something that was ingrained to them young, or if it's something that they've watched someone else do. But that's something that I'm trying to work out with them now, because there's a time and a place for all of these things. One thing that is not taught about take out floaters, the rest of them are all sort of layups, is your first 2 steps are distance, your jump is height. That's how we've got to be teaching it. Like the whole athleticism of finishing over the top of people, or finishing as close to the basket as you can. And we've got kids that are going long first step, long second step, long jump, and they never get more than this far off the ground, because you're not jumping up, you're jumping forward. It has to be something you step out to them as you show them what the goal form looks like. And it has to be one of those things. It's forward, forward, up, forward, forward, up. And that's how we're trying to teach that. Floaters, the rest of them are all sort of the same. They're all just different kinds of layups. Floaters, it's the same sort of thing, but instead of it being forward, forward, up, and 2 big steps and then up, it's big step, little step, up. And it's that little step that gives you that separation between the big defender that's rotating over you that you're trying to float the ball over, and allows you to put more emphasis on the up instead of the forward, because it's a real change of body momentum thing. And that's really good for short guards. We have girls at SDP like Gemma and Moore that really like those floaters, and that's going to be what they have. It's going to have to be what they're good at, because they're little. How to teach them. So again, this is the most important thing that I think we overlook too much, because often we don't want to get it wrong. Personally, I always get players to demo things because I'm not as good as them. But demo the ideal and explain in nitpicking detail what that ideal is. Because if they know that, then it becomes easy to correct them on the way. And maybe you thought of good terms to do it, same foot. You might say same foot as in same foot in the air as the hand. It might be same foot as in jump off the same foot, but establish those little terms with the kids where you can just say, Bruce, same foot. And he goes, oh, yeah, I know what that means. It's the same with establishing what an athletic stance is. So you can just say, Fletcher, stance. And he goes, oh, yep, I know exactly what that means. So you establish those little terms that make it really easy to correct them throughout the way. But what I see too much is trying to go into too much detail after the kid's made the mistake and he doesn't realize what he's done wrong. But if you've actually shown him or her what the ideal is first, you can think back and say, now remember when I said that second step had to be long, and he goes, oh yeah, I do remember that because you explained it to me at the start of the drill. That's not what you're doing. Whereas if you're picking on him and saying, hey, that second step's not long enough, Fletcher, and he's like, I don't get which one the second step is, it's hard to correct on the way. Step it out slowly, especially for the young kids. I was working with year 9 kids the last term we were at school, and I was stepping out slowly for them. It was a new team that I had. It was one that I didn't know where everybody was at on their basic fundamentals. So we just stepped it out until everybody got it. The mic and drill, I can't demo this for you here, but it's a really good one to look up if you're thinking about 1v0 or even 1v1 under some light pressure finishing. It is what we get all our kids to do, especially the kids that struggle to locate the basket, because it's about being able to finish consistently looking up and consistently the basket. And a lot of the kids we have that miss a lot of layups because they locate that thing too late. So I encourage you to YouTube that one if you haven't already, and it's a really good one. So once you've stepped it out slowly, that's where we bring it in to make it competitive. Now, make it competitive doesn't necessarily mean it make it one-on-one. It might be putting them under a time constraint. You know, you've got to make 10 in 40 seconds. And then they worked hard to do that, because the first thing that's going to go when you make it a bit of a rush is any of that form. And it's about, all right, we're putting them under the pressure of doing it quickly. And that's where they're going to lose it. Now we've got to coach them back to doing it the right way whilst they're trying to do it quickly. And then when you add that defense, now they've actually had that under a little bit of pressure, which makes it a fair bit easier to, they're under the pressure of a clock. Now they're under the pressure of a player. So it's really stepping it out a fair bit slower than that. Oh, hang on. One thing I'll show you before I go. So zigzag dribbling, right? It's pretty much my life. At the end of it, when they get to the other end, they don't just go to the corner and then walk across to the starting corner and start again. This is where you practice a bunch of finishing moves. So again, actually Aussie does that move in a game all the time, but most of the time I give them really difficult things to do after we've done the basic ones first. And the idea of getting them to reverse pivot into a pass fake down the lane, step back into a forward pivot, up fake, and then bring that pivot foot back across your body and into a reverse layup wasn't something that I saw Austin do a lot in the under 16s when I was coaching him in the state program. But after we worked on this, not that I'm taking credit for it, like Aussie's a smart kid and that's why he gets to do it. But after we worked on this relentlessly, you watch him in a VC game on a Friday night playing against much bigger kids, and the amount of times he gets them up in the air doing this sort of stuff is just crazy. And it's just because we've worked on all these different combinations, and he's a smart enough kid to pick which one's going to work at which time. So this is what we do at the end. I prescribe really difficult, sort of different, hard to remember combos, and we try and get them through all of that. So that way they're working out how to be better finishers under the basket. And if you're teaching some younger kids, that might just be one of those ones where it's like, this is a left-hand layup, this is a right-hand reversal. But it's a really good way. So you're getting your pivoting, your stopping and starting, your ball handling, your dribble moves, and your finishing into one drill. And they don't even realize they've worked on all that different stuff. You've done it for 6 minutes, they're knackered, and you've actually covered so many topics. So that's why I love the drill. That's why I preach it everywhere I go and use it every session, as Richard will be able to testify. So that's it from me today. I actually got through everything. I don't feel like I rushed. Hopefully I didn't go too long. Hopefully everybody feels like they got something out of that. More than happy to take questions now. More than happy to take questions via email. Like I had a bunch of questions last week. That was really good. I'm more than happy to answer emails after the fact. If it's because you don't want to ask the question tonight because you don't think of it tonight, no dramas to me either way. Feel free to send them through. You can just reply to the email I sent you on the invite here. That's no worries. So yeah. Any other questions before we jump off? No worries. All right. Well, thanks very much, guys. We'll be back next week. I'll get the invite out for that tomorrow when I've uploaded this to YouTube. And yeah, send them through if you've got them. Thanks, guys.